I traveled back to the age of 17 and saw how my boyfriend was deeply in love with his first love. They hugged under the streetlight, kissed in the falling snow, and secretly poked and teased each other with pens in class. His girl had a bright and radiant smile. I froze under the broken streetlight, crying so embarrassingly. When I realized that I had traveled back to 17, my first reaction was to go and find Jonathan, who was 18 at that time. He was the man I had already met his parents with and was preparing to enter the marriage hall with. Even if it was more of a one-sided liking on my part. Standing at the entrance of his high school, I was holding 2 cups of hot milk tea. He had once casually mentioned that there was a really nice milk tea shop here. By the time the sun had set and small snowflakes were falling, as the students poured out of the evening self-study session, a long queue immediately formed in front of the milk tea shop on the right-hand side. I was standing there when I was accidentally bumped by 2 rowdy high school students. "Sorry," the boy said with a smile. I looked up and instantly blushed. The other had long eyebrows, black eyelashes, warm brown eyes that were as gentle as if they had light, looking exactly like a teenage version of Jonathan. "It's okay." Jonathan let out an exaggerated sigh of relief and then smiled at me with his eyebrows arched, his voice gentle and light. "Be careful." "Yeah." I was just about to continue speaking. The male classmate beside him grinned mischievously, patted him on the shoulder, and glanced towards the school entrance. "Look, she's out." Jonathan dashed over like the wind, not even bothering to reply to his friend. Under the big tree beside the school gate, stood a schoolgirl with long hair down to her waist and a slender figure, looking cheerful. The male classmate beside me folded his arms, watching the scene with great interest, and casually reminded me, "Little girl, don't take it to heart. Jonathan already has a girlfriend." Staring at the 2 of them talking not far away, Jonathan, who had always been so at ease with me, was so shy and at a loss in front of her that he didn't even know how to hand over the milk tea in his hand. In the snow on that winter night, the girl stood on her tiptoes, hooked her arms around his neck, and gave him a gentle kiss. Jonathan was stunned for a few seconds, then slowly lifted one of his long arms to rest on her waist, as if longing to hold her but not daring to use too much force. Her girlish smile was bright and radiant. The streetlight above went out, and the people around scattered away. I froze under the broken streetlight, hanging my head, crying silently and so embarrassingly. The milk tea in my hand had gone cold. Actually, Jonathan and I met through a blind date. He never hid anything from me and even told me his phone password truthfully. When I accidentally picked up the wrong phone, I had once inadvertently flipped through the photos in his album, including several envelopes that had been torn up and then pieced back together. The letter paper in the photos looked a bit old, with a layer of yellowish tint from the passage of time. It seemed that there was no dark secret. In the year he was 18, he met a passionate, beloved, and beautiful girl. Even after they broke up and were separated, he still couldn't forget her even when he was about to get married. They hadn't been in contact anymore, but he had shed tears on the paper, written so many love letters, and even always had someone else hidden in the depths of his heart. I liked him so much that I didn't have the courage to talk about it openly, nor did I want to leave him. But this time, I don't know where the luck came from. Going back to the past gave me a chance to fall in love. I thought I could try to step into his youth, cut off this estrangement from the root, and get the proof of our love. I was wrong and lost completely. After walking back to school like a walking corpse, I thought I would return to the future once I woke up from sleep, but nothing happened. I didn't understand what fate wanted me to do here. Was it to fight for someone who didn't love me and bring humiliation upon myself? Before the college entrance examination, perhaps fate was playing a joke. My estimated score was better than last time, and by coincidence, I entered the same university as Jonathan. Barring any accidents, according to the future development, Jonathan would be with me again 2 years after graduating from university. Thinking of this, I despised myself for being too sick and cheap. Why couldn't I just give up? But I still obediently went there. But what I didn't expect was that not only was Jonathan here, but his first love, his current girlfriend, was also in the same university. I was dragging a large but old and grayish suitcase towards the campus. When I was climbing the steps, someone called out to me, "Student, be careful." Jonathan, wearing a red waistcoat, rushed in front of me and grabbed the heavy school bag on my shoulder. My heart skipped a beat. Before I could say anything, a graceful female voice chased after us. "Jonathan, no matter how enthusiastic you are, you should first ask if people need your help." As she said that, the girl came up to me. Her long ponytail swayed behind her head. Her tone was natural and enthusiastic. "Student, I'm Cherry. Which department are you going to? Do you need us to show you the way?" Jonathan was also smiling. He waved at me and said, "Hello, student. We are school volunteers. Although we are also freshmen, we have explored the campus a few days in advance." As he said that, he seemingly casually raised a hand, touched the top of the girl's head, and then mischievously tugged on her ponytail gently. The girl put her hands on her hips and glared at him, then clenched her fist and gave him a light punch. "Jonathan, be good." They were a perfect match. Cherry was enthusiastic, generous, gentle, and lively, welcoming everything in the world without any malice. She seemed like a really nice person. No wonder Jonathan couldn't forget her. Instead, I was like a shameful outsider. There was even a hole in the sock inside my newly bought sports shoes, and a sense of inferiority and sadness seemed to seep in. I couldn't bring myself to say no. I couldn't help but suspect Jonathan and Cherry with mean thoughts, and even vaguely wondered, was I the only one who had traveled back? Did Jonathan really have no memory and no impression of me at all? After they helped me get settled, Cherry waved goodbye to me with a big smile. Jonathan was like a knight guarding a rose, imitating her gentle smile and staying by her side. I subconsciously reached out, wanting to grab the corner of Jonathan's clothes, wanting to say something. Even just a goodbye would do. "Jonathan." The backs of the two of them stopped simultaneously. I took a deep breath and asked, "Cherry, can I have a private word with Jonathan?" Cherry was a bit surprised. She looked up at Jonathan and then at me. Finally, she nodded. "Sure, go ahead. I'll wait in the shade over there." Jonathan frowned and walked closer to me. His face looked a bit ugly, and even the gentleness in his tone faded. "Student, do you really have to avoid my girlfriend to say something?" Even though it was a sunny day, cold sweat was seeping from my palms. Pressing down on my trembling voice, I asked, "Jonathan, do you really not remember me?" Seeing me like this, Jonathan furrowed his brows and was silent for a moment, then softened his tone. "I don't remember where I've seen you. It seems that you're reminded of some bad memories because of me. I'm really sorry, and I have a girlfriend now." I opened my mouth, not knowing how to start for a moment. Those absurd memories, the outlandish identities, the situation of traveling through time and space. I lowered my eyes, holding back the inexplicably welling up tears, and said, "Sorry, I made a mistake. Thank you, both of you, for your help today." Jonathan let out a sigh of relief, but also felt a bit sorry. He looked back at Cherry behind him. Cherry trotted over, first kicked Jonathan's calf, and then gently stood up for me. "Jonathan, how could you make someone cry? I told you to be gentle." She took out a pack of tissues from her pocket, handed them to me, hesitated for a moment when she wanted to help wipe my tears, and then withdrew her hand. Cherry comforted me very earnestly. "I don't know what happened between you two. I'll apologize on behalf of Jonathan and you first." At this moment, I felt so ashamed of myself that I just wanted to find a place to hide. Gripping the pack of tissues tightly, with tears blinding my eyes, I looked at her and asked, "Don't you think it's too much for me to take the initiative to talk to your boyfriend alone?" Cherry widened her eyes and shook her head. Her smile was gentle and confident. "No. I can see that you're really sad. I believe Jonathan won't do bad things, and I also have a hunch that you're not a bad person." She patted my shoulder. "Cheer up." Before Cherry walked away with Jonathan, she stuffed a small biscuit into my hand. It was sweet, and even the tissue she gave me carried a pleasant faint fragrance. I thought I should just let it go. Although I was greedy for Jonathan's tenderness, I didn't want to make myself so despicable. Just like in my memories, on my 18th birthday, both my father and mother, who were divorced and had each remarried, coincidentally cut off my living expenses. Once again, I was all alone and helpless. Days passed in a dull and aimless way. I thought of many ways to make money quickly and accumulate capital, but none of them were suitable for me. I had no choice but to continue working part-time in a fast food restaurant. I even got a job tutoring junior high school students because I had entered a good university this time. Until one day after finishing a part-time job, on my way back to school passing by the old and shabby neighborhood at the back, I witnessed a dangerous incident. These days, few residential areas are equipped with surveillance cameras, especially in some chaotic places with many tenants. I vaguely heard a group of men laughing and jeering. A man's voice cursed harshly, "Cherry, what are you so high and mighty for? As soon as I sent you a message, you still came running over in the middle of the night." Sure enough, Cherry's voice rang out the next second, trembling as she forced herself to sound calm. "You deliberately tricked me into coming here with these guys, right? If you let me go now, you still have a chance to stop this. I won't call the police either." A relatively young man's voice replied hesitantly and weakly in a low voice, I'm sorry. I'm scared of being beaten too. As long as you help me this once, I'll definitely repay you in the future." The other greasy men laughed a few times, as if they were about to do something. Cherry's voice, shaking like a sieve, suddenly rang out, "Help! Get away from me." I ran forward with all my might, and surprisingly, I still had the spare energy to think. Even the most extreme opposites will have a connecting gap. So, making a completely opposite decision is just a thought away. I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Fire! Whose house is on fire?" Cherry probably came from a well-off family and didn't know what kind of disgusting things could lurk in the dark side, but some people can always anticipate it. Especially in our country. In chaotic and hard-to-manage areas, there is usually a police station nearby for quickly handling unexpected incidents. Another point, which is probably the advantage of me traveling back. When in danger, most people don't want to cause more trouble. In some cases, shouting for help might actually make no one dare to step forward. If it's near a residential area, you can shout that there's a fire and it needs to be put out. When everyone is in the same boat, when a group of people come across a social danger right in front of them, it's easier to arouse their hidden selfless kindness. Cherry was saved. The 4 hooligans were pinned to the ground by the police, not daring to look up or make a sound. Cherry's legs were weak. She was helped out by a female police officer. Her hairband had come loose during the escape and dodging, and several strands of hair were sticking messily to her face. She was holding back her tears. First, she called out, "Thank you, police uncles and aunts." After listening to the police's comfort and explanation, her eyes lit up, but 2 lines of tears suddenly fell down. She suddenly called out to me who was trying to sneak away, "Yolanda." I hesitated for a moment, but finally chose to turn around and face her. Suddenly, I was hugged tightly by someone. It was Cherry, crying softly. Her tears wet my shoulder. She was crying and laughing as she said, "Thank you, Yolanda. It's so nice to meet you, to run into you." I was so embarrassed that I didn't know what to do. Finally, I put my arms around her and patted her on the back. Just for comfort, as if she were a stranger. After all, I had once cried and wanted a hug too, and I couldn't bear to push away a hurt person casually. An elder took a break from the angry interrogation and smiled happily. They were all just kids. After Cherry had calmed down, she sat on a chair with support and recounted the whole experience, sentence by sentence. Fortunately, no disaster had actually happened. I rubbed the pack of tissues in my pocket and slowly took it out and handed it to her. Cherry was trying hard to hold back her tears. Seeing this, her eyes became redder. She said thank you as she took out a tissue, took a deep breath, and winked at me playfully. "Wow, your tissues are so fragrant. No wonder you're my Yolanda." I wasn't used to such passionate tenderness. What's more, under the warm-colored light, I stood in front of her, looking silently at her strikingly beautiful eyes. They were the same brown pupils as Jonathan's. She had just survived a disaster, and her panic hadn't subsided yet, but she was trying to make others relax and laugh, making her seem even gentler and more beautiful. Thinking about it carefully, the tenderness that Jonathan had was actually from her. He was imitating, trying to hold on to his beloved Rose in another way. And that tenderness was what I had always longed for but never had. I lowered my eyes and said in a low voice, "You gave this to me before. It's yours." "Yes." A figure rushed into my sight, with the corners of the clothes fluttering. I saw the person I liked, hugging another girl tightly, as if afraid that she would disappear. The girl being hugged had a look of confusion on her face. When she realized what was happening, she hugged Jonathan back tightly, dependently, and with a sense of grievance. "Jonathan. You're finally here. I was really afraid that I might not be able to see you. Cherry, I'll never, never be late again." Jonathan almost wanted to merge her into his bones so that he could protect her every day. His voice was already choked with sobs. This was the first time I had seen Jonathan so out of control. I thought the smile on my face must look really ugly. So, I wisely lowered my head and took a few small steps back, allowing myself to be half covered by the shadow. "Cherry. The tissue was given by you, the fragrance comes from you, and Jonathan belongs to you too." I never knew my memory could be so good, being able to vividly replay those scenes of memories. I was like a puppet holding a knife, trapped in a dark space, unable to sense the outside time and movements, only able to carve out the letters and words between him and others inch by inch in my heart. I remembered the letter photographed in Jonathan's phone. It had been torn up and then glued back together. I could vaguely make out Cherry's handwriting, delicate yet unrestrained. The letter said, "Jonathan, lately I've always regretted being too kind-hearted back then. If I hadn't believed the lies, if I hadn't gone to that alley, I wouldn't have gotten AIDS, I wouldn't be afraid to hold your hand, and I wouldn't resent some people so uglily. I don't want to lie lifelessly on a hospital bed waiting to die." Having no expectation for the future is a really terrifying thing. Although I always encourage myself to be gentle and strong, I'm also afraid of the future and accidents, and I'm always worried about the sword of Damocles hanging over my head. Now, at least I don't have to worry about that anymore. Sometimes I also comfort myself like this. I can fully control my own future. Every tomorrow might be extremely interesting to me. I want to use this time, while I still have the strength, to complete a bucket list I've newly planned. Hey, I don't want to be resentful and regretful because of bad people. I firmly believe that what goes around comes around. Jonathan, I also have a favor to ask of you. Don't be so fierce towards life, don't do anything unnecessary, don't make me feel so guilty about you. Forget me and live a good life. P.S. Control your impatient and fierce temper. When you get a girlfriend in the future, be gentle with her. Be more mature. Be more steady. And don't make your parents who love you worry. Be good. Thank you for asking. Let's just say I loved you. Your ex-girlfriend Cherry, written on a certain morning by the seaside, over. For a moment, I maliciously thought that if I hadn't traveled back in time or pretended not to hear Cherry's cry for help, would I still be able to have the future Jonathan? Even if it was only for a short while and required a long wait. But those futures were all things I had personally experienced. How could they be false? How could I erase them from my life with my own hands? How could I bear to do that? Perhaps that's how feelings are. You must repeatedly engrave the memories that you once leaped for joy, anticipated, and created with your own hands clearly. It would be best if they were so vivid that they seemed to draw blood. In the end, you put on a mask to cover them up and pretend that everything is still okay. Even if these tears are as salty as salt and the pain is too hard to disguise, and the heart is still beating steadily, so I can only move forward. But I overlooked one thing and even underestimated how persistent Cherry could be. Since the time I saved Cherry, she would occasionally call me her savior and enthusiastically yet appropriately infiltrate my life. Cherry even gave me an affectionate nickname. Jonathan, with that gentle and grateful expression, stood relaxed behind her. When he looked over from afar, I saw that both of them were smiling with their eyes and eyebrows curved. He also joined in her antics. Changing his usual gentle and aloof attitude towards making friends, he familiarly called me Yolanda and regarded me as one of their friends. This was a form of torture for me. After I had countless times in the most tactful way possible, Cherry would send Jonathan away and occasionally come to my dormitory to bring me fruits and small snacks, as if feeding a little hamster. Even Cherry insisted on escorting me to my part-time job. She argued plausibly, "Yolanda, it's too dangerous for you, a young girl, to be out there on your own. Look, I'm a living example. You helped me. I can't just do nothing. At least give me a chance to show my gratitude." After escorting me a few times, Cherry suddenly announced that she had also found a part-time job at the same address and would go in and out with me every day, always by my side. To be honest, if I hadn't traveled back from the future where Jonathan was my soon-to-be married boyfriend, I would surely have treated her wholeheartedly and regarded her as my best friend. But I couldn't. Even though I couldn't, by the end of my freshman year, Cherry had naturally become one of my good friends. The other one was Jonathan, who was just there to make up the numbers and didn't often appear in front of me. Actually, I had always been a withdrawn person. Not everyone can live like a shining little sun. My parents were busy taking care of their respective families, and no one cared about me. Even when I was 7 or 8 years old, I was bullied by a group of people from the same primary school for a while. Cherry said that her mother had always wanted to meet me, but it wasn't appropriate to disturb me casually during the school term. We had a meal together. Cherry's mother treated us. She was a very elegant and beautiful divorced single woman, and her way of interacting with children was more like chatting and having a heart-to-heart talk with sisters. After that, the two of them were quiet for a while. I was also gradually getting used to breaking away from the past that involved Jonathan. To be honest, compared to that future, I had a lot of things to be busy with in my studies and life now. Even to get rid of the shadow of love, I joined the famous music club on campus and also got to know a few alumni, but our friendships were rather shallow. So much so that when I saw these two people outside my rented house during the summer vacation of my sophomore year, I was stunned for a moment. "Cherry? Jonathan? Yolanda, happy birthday." Cherry handed me a pink and white velvet gift box with a mysterious gift inside, smiling. Jonathan also repeated softly, "Happy birthday." This was the first time since I became an adult that I had received birthday wishes in person and such an obviously thoughtful gift. I invited the two of them to come in and sit down. But after they sat down, they seemed to want to say something but hesitated. For a moment, the three of us just looked at each other. A warm feeling spread densely in my heart. I couldn't help but smile. "What? Do you have something to say?" Cherry secretly kicked Jonathan from an angle where she thought I couldn't see. Jonathan cleared his throat, stared at me for a few seconds, then turned to look at Cherry and casually touched his nose with his hand. "You'd better say it." Cherry blushed unusually. She uncomfortably tugged at the dress that was neatly draped over her knees and finally said after a while, "Yolanda, do you have any free time recently?" At this moment, a subtle sense of amusement arose in my heart. The two people who originally had an emotional entanglement were still at a rather immature age this year, being shy to even talk about things. "Isn't this it?" I picked up the water glass on the table and took a sip. The two of them looked at each other and then looked at me again, their eyes full of expectation. "Yolanda, let's go watch the sunset and sunrise together." They seemed afraid that I would disagree. Cherry quickly added, "I've been working hard at my part-time job recently for this trip." Jonathan wasn't as outspoken as Cherry. He just said a bit awkwardly, "I've also been practicing driving well for this trip." I was silent for a few seconds. Seeing the two of them slowly look away, looking a bit embarrassed and not daring to look at me, I said, "Sure." Cherry's eyes lit up even more. She rushed over from across the table, hugged my arm tightly and shook it. "Eh? You agreed?" I nodded and asked teasingly, "Did you two just ask me as a formality just now?" Cherry shook her head like a rattle. Her laughter rang merrily in my ear. "No, it's just that. You agreed so readily. I said I recently took on an English translation job, so I have a bit more money. Besides, occasionally, I also wanted to be more lenient with myself. Let impulse take me far away, just as if life was a wonderful gift. Looking down at the small square gift box clenched in my palm, I turned around and smiled at Cherry. Thank you, Cherry, and Jonathan. Cherry hopped a little behind me and followed me eagerly. Yolanda, let's me help you pack your luggage. I said non-committally. I clenched the box tightly in my hand, somewhat greedily hoping that the warmth of this moment could be retained, for a little longer, even longer. Preferably, let me also become a warm person. When I sat in the back seat of the car, watching the roadside scenery jolting and passing by in front of me, some memories flashed through my mind like a slideshow. In that future, he and she should be fulfilling Cherry's bucket list at this moment. The first and last items on it were to watch the sunrise and sunset, to see the birth and twilight of life, to observe the waxing and waning of the sun and the moon, all those aimless and meaningless acts. In that future, I should be alone at this moment, hesitating to buy a 6-inch cake with inferior cream and eating it mouthful by mouthful. I would swallow, cry, thinking about loneliness, comparing it with happiness, sinking into coldness and confusion. That was then, and this is now. I end their trip now. I was added to the mix. The place we were going to had no twilight of life, no predetermined flaws. There was only the cheerful little tune that Cherry was humming softly in my ear, the sunlight shining on my eyelashes and cheeks, and Jonathan fumbled around in the front passenger seat and then reached back to hand me 2 cans of drinks. Cherry was the first to take them. She held one in each hand and held them up in front of me. Yolanda, you choose first. I randomly picked one. Cherry quickly opened the pull tab for me. The sound of the bubbles hissing up. Cherry handed it to me and then took a sip of her own. She said, I've never tasted this flavor before. Surprisingly, it's quite good. I thought so too. It was really nice. And it was actually the delicious want milk. It is really good. Sometimes I also wonder, did I love Jonathan as a person? Or was it that I had been lonely and single for so long back then that I fell in love with a lifeline, as well as the respect and warmth that the other person brought? We were all missing something important. Jonathan had once had his own love, so he seemed to radiate some light. As for me, meeting Jonathan back then was probably a very lucky thing for me. Before that, I was lifeless, without even a spiritual anchor. The more one has endured the cold, the more one yearns for that warmth, even if one has to constantly worry about the risk of being burned. As it says in The Little Prince, if you want to form a bond with someone, you have to take the risk of crying. I had mentally prepared myself in that future, thinking that we would be like an ordinary couple in the secular world. He might not love me that much, but our relationship could still limp along and last forever. Deep down, I'm a believer in love. In other words, even when reading a novel, I sincerely hope that the male and female protagonists can be pure in their feelings. But back then, I had been single for over 20 years, unable to meet the right man for me for a long time, and was living in such confusion. So when I met a suitable, gentle man who attracted me, I unconsciously learned to compromise. I even hoped that the time I could hold on to through compromise could be longer, even longer. It's so ridiculous that I longed so much to be loved and to love, but could only pray uneasily. I had never been truly loved, nor had I ever truly given love. Taking a distracted sip of want milk, I was momentarily at a loss. What can be used as proof of loving someone? Then, what about when you don't love someone anymore? What should I do? I looked up at Jonathan in the driver's seat. He was distracted, reaching for the snacks on the passenger seat. Immediately after, Cherry snorted with laughter, climbed from the middle of the seats to the front, and swatted his hand away. While reaching to adjust the car music, she scolded gently but with a bit of roughness, Jonathan, damn it, drive carefully. An old song started playing. When she turned back, she gave a playful twist to the soft flesh on Jonathan's waist. Jonathan hissed in pain. Cherry squinted and smiled, then reached forward to grab a bag of custard-filled mini buns and stuffed them into my hand. Yolanda, let's have something to fill our stomachs first. It was childish, but still, quite cute. After arriving at the seaside, the sun was just starting to set. We walked barefoot towards the horizon where the sea and the sky met. Cherry held onto my arm. Occasionally, when she thought Jonathan was walking too slowly, she would give him a gentle kick. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, the corners of his mouth slightly curved, and retaliated by bending down and scooping up water to splash on her. Cherry shielded me while trying to dodge, but always failed to avoid it completely. So she simply ran over to confront Jonathan, and the two of them splashed water at each other, using both hands and feet. The setting sun was shining brightly, and the sea waves were rising. They were laughing, so close and intimate. To be honest, in the future, Jonathan and I treated each other with respect. Even when discussing wedding arrangements and choosing wedding dresses, he was always polite and distant, gentle and measured. I had never expected to see this scene in front of me. So, he also had this youthful and temperamental stage. However, this wasn't the youth that belonged to me. Before I could get lost in melancholy for a while, Cherry and Jonathan pulled me to join in the fun. Of course, Jonathan still pretended to avoid contact with me casually. He still remembered the incident when I pulled him to talk at the beginning of the semester. Probably because I had saved Cherry, he had accepted me. He seemed to never reject any of Cherry's requests, as if there was no bottom line worth drawing a boundary. But in the future, he never took the initiative to hold my hand. There was only one time when we were strolling on the commercial street after having Valentine's Day dinner. I was nervous and took the initiative to hold his hand. But it was just like holding hands with a friend, not interlocking fingers. After playing around for a while, we sat on the beach, watching the setting sun gradually disappear into the distance. I was on the left, Cherry was in the middle, and Jonathan was on her right. Cherry turned her head to look at me, smiling heartily but also a bit wearily. Yolanda, do you have any wish that you want to fulfill right now, immediately? Let me think about it. I evaded the question. Cherry said softly, okay, and turned her head back. It seemed that she was thinking about possible options while blankly looking at the sea. Suddenly, I remembered that in the unchanged future, it should be Cherry fulfilling her bucket list one by one at this moment, and Jonathan was following her closely, worried about her. The two of them tacitly pretended not to see each other, waiting for the day of the final judgment of death. Now it had become asking about my wish, and I couldn't help but find it a bit funny. Just as I was about to curl the corners of my mouth into a smile, looking past the few strands of black hair on Cherry's head that were being blown by the sea breeze, I saw Jonathan looking at Cherry with gentle and infatuated eyes, his gaze fixed on her without moving. I was a bit slow to look away. For a moment, I was also worried about being caught staring at Jonathan, but Jonathan was focused on looking at Cherry, tracing her eyelashes, the side of her nose, her lips, her chin, and even reaching out to touch a strand of her hair that was being blown by the wind as the light changed. He didn't notice my gaze at all, or anything about me. In his eyes, there was only Cherry at this moment. The beloved is his most precious sun, moon, and universe. Others, including me, were just insignificant backdrops, like the setting sun. I suddenly understood that some people don't travel to see the scenery, but only for the person who is with them and in their hearts. As for wishes, actually I used to have them, but looking at Jonathan, who only had eyes for Cherry, and the gentle and absent-minded girl, I suddenly understood the feeling of having something hard to say. My former wishes were taboos, illusions, and secrets known to no one. After a pause, I said, Cherry, Jonathan, let's find a place to have dinner. The two of them readily agreed. We randomly picked a place with high praise. When we got there, I saw a very familiar wedding dress chain store at the corner. The Seaside, wedding dresses, true love. These elements are always attractive, especially when the store is so beautifully decorated. Cherry's eyes lit up. She put her arm around my shoulder and wanted to go inside. Yolanda, let's go and try them on? Let's take a photo together. My heart skipped a beat. My legs felt as if they were filled with lead and I couldn't lift them. I had been to this wedding dress store with Jonathan in the future. Although we weren't really married at that time, we had almost gone through all these secular process. If I were to go in again and try on wedding dresses in front of Jonathan, my state of mind would still be a bit complicated. But it was okay, not a big deal. Following Cherry into the store, we each tried on the wedding dresses we picked for each other. The moment we walked out of the fitting rooms, Jonathan suddenly stood up, his eyes passing over me and fixed on Cherry. He was like a knight guarding a garden. When he saw the white rose in full bloom at this moment, the knight stood there stiffly, his neck redder than the flower, but he was so infatuated, loyal, and unchanging. I still remembered that in the future, when I walked out of the fitting room, Jonathan's expression was always indifferent. He just smiled faintly and said it was nice. It was like an employee being dragged to deal with a boss, or just any not-so-close classmate, colleague, anyone. In short, not a lover. While I was distracted, I was suddenly hugged by Cherry. She smiled and praised me without hesitation. Our Yolanda looks so beautiful. Whoa, I like beautiful sisters with a cold temperament the most. Looking at myself and Cherry in the mirror, I suddenly didn't feel like crying anymore. Cherry, you're also super beautiful, like a little sun that shines. Cherry was a bit shy and curved the corners of her mouth, then raised an eyebrow and said to the young man in the mirror in the distance, "Jonathan, why do you seem a bit lacking in presence?" Jonathan chuckled and shrugged at me. "Yolanda, I'm hungry. Let's go eat?" Hey, doesn't Yolanda have the necklace that Cherry was trying on? Could it be? Cherry retorted, "Jonathan, where did you learn to sow discord?" Jonathan walked closer to her and gave her a light flick on the forehead, smiling a bit affectionately, "Learned from you." After a pause, he muttered in a low voice, "Keep being naughty, and you'll get what's coming to you sooner or later." Cherry put her hands on her hips, "I'm waiting. Come on." After taking photos of trying on the wedding dresses, Jonathan also changed into a suit. He didn't seem uncomfortable at all. I was on Cherry's left, Jonathan was on Cherry's right, and the three of us made a childish V sign. I didn't even need to look at the developed photos to know how redundant I was in our trio. After changing clothes, on the way to the restaurant, Jonathan also had a bit of a smile on his face, waiting for an opportunity to act. "Ha ha 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 ha, Jonathan, you're cheating. No tickling. Yolanda, ha 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 ha, protect me." After this trip ended, soon enough, we returned to our ordinary and uneventful college lives. Sometimes when I had free time, I would wonder if that future without Cherry was just a nightmare. During the senior year internship, all three of us found fairly satisfactory jobs. In my previous life at this time, I was still mired in a sense of loss and couldn't break free. The internship company I encountered wasn't great either, and the not-so-smooth life also increased my dependence on Jonathan later. This time, Jonathan still chose City A. Actually, judging from Jonathan's major, his development prospects in City A weren't exactly bright. But Cherry was there too, and that was her hometown, her place of return. At that moment, I understood everything. On the day of graduation, it was a sunny day. We took one photo after another. Cherry put her arm around mine and let out a soft sigh. "I'll really miss you, Yolanda. Are you free this week? I'd like to invite you to visit my place. My mom also said she misses you." I hesitated for a moment, but still wanted to keep my distance from them. So I said I wasn't free. Cherry pursed her lips, blinked, and threw herself at me, giving me a very warm hug. "Then, take care. I'll contact you whenever I'm free. Don't find me annoying." I glanced at Jonathan standing aside. He lifted his chin, gave a light smile in this direction, and then simply turned around, not looking at us anymore. For no reason, I felt a bit stuffy in my heart. I said, "Okay, I won't." After all, besides love, there are many things in my life worth cherishing. I don't want to let Cherry's friendship disappear with the wind. I'd rather bend down to pick it up and taste this sweetness that might be laced with bits of broken glass. Time passed really quickly, as if it was on double speed for me. Many major social events unfolded as scheduled. All I could do was protect myself and remind my only two friends. On my birthday in the first year after graduation, I originally planned to spend it alone. I had even booked an expensive high-end restaurant and a cake that I'd been longing to try for a long time. I knew my place. Many friendships are only limited to a certain stage, a kind of finding joy in hardship, when forced to coexist in the same space. After all, a few months ago, I had also taken the initiative asked Cherry and Jonathan. On Cherry's birthday, I asked, "Do you need me to come and get together with you?" She said no need. Working was already busy and tiring enough. Jonathan also chimed in beside her. Of course I should understand that after entering society and being in different places, this was normal, and I wasn't surprised at all. It's just that I would remember the promises we made to keep in touch so earnestly during our last meeting. Therefore, when I received a call from Cherry and Jonathan saying that they were coming to celebrate my birthday and were already on the high-speed train, I couldn't help but feel both surprised and inevitably apprehensive. Was it reasonable for them to be so nice to me? I had just been lucky enough to do some insignificant little things. Wouldn't they get tired of making friends and being so enthusiastic like this? In other words, it didn't feel real to me. How could anyone be so good at repaying kindness? And they had been so nice to someone like me for 5 years without a break. The phone rang. Cherry's voice on the other end sounded troubled and weak. "Yolanda, I have something here. I might have to go back first." See, this was the reality that most people would encounter. I said it was okay. Unconsciously, I let out a sigh of relief in my heart. Some people seem to feel uncomfortable even when accepting favors from others. But it's not that they're ungrateful. More often, they're just afraid that they won't be able to repay the kindness. Cherry stammered uncharacteristically, and Jonathan beside her was also silent. I had a bad feeling in my heart. Besides Cherry, Jonathan was rarely not straightforward. It was as if he was afraid of something, worried about something. "If you need any help with anything, remember to let me know." After a pause, I still added a bit embarrassedly, "If you consider me a friend, just be casual. I won't disturb you anymore." "Yolanda." Cherry burst into tears. My mind went blank instantly. After being stuck for a while, I asked, "What's going on? Why are you crying so pitifully?" The man on the other end of the phone sighed and took the phone. His voice was a bit hoarse. "Yolanda, something happened to Cherry's mom." When I rushed to the hospital in City A, Cherry and Jonathan were waiting outside the emergency room. Life and death were separated by a door, with a red light on top, as if it could go out at any moment. Cherry was squatting on the ground, burying her head and not saying a word. I looked at Jonathan. His eyes were red-rimmed. He managed a forced smile at me. "You're here? Happy birthday. May you have a healthy birthday." I nodded and sighed softly. "Don't mention that at this time. How's Auntie's condition?" "Not very optimistic." Cherry also looked up, her face full of tears, trying very hard to give me a comforting smile. But she just couldn't manage it. The light in her eyes had gone out. "It's okay. If you can't smile, just cry. It doesn't matter how ugly you cry." Jonathan added that in time before I could say the rest of the sentence. He said, "It's okay. I'm here. I'm here with Yolanda." To be honest, I had said those words before too. It was in that future without Cherry. At that time, not long after Jonathan and I had decided to date through a blind date. Jonathan's father hadn't been in good health. Seeing that Jonathan had been single since Cherry left and didn't even have a companion by his side, his parents were worried. So they urged Jonathan to go on a blind date and find a girl to settle down with as soon as possible so that they could feel at ease. Words became prophecy. Jonathan's father's health took a turn for the worse, and it was a scene like this now. Jonathan and I were waiting outside the door. I comforted Jonathan by saying, "Cry. It's okay. I'm here." After Jonathan's father passed away, his mother lost a lot of weight and became even more concerned about Jonathan's and my wedding, almost pushing for it. Elders seem to be like this. They always like to worry. Even when they're so sick that they might leave, they still think about arranging as much as possible to give their children a worry-free future. Cherry's mom was no exception. The doctor said that Cherry's mom had pulled through, but her physical condition was very poor. It was uncertain how long she could hold on. Cherry kept her head down, sitting by her mother's bedside waiting for her to wake up. She said, "It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, Mom would be much better off than now. She wouldn't be so overworked. Her heart wasn't good to begin with." I patted her on the shoulder and comforted her softly. "If you think like that, Auntie will definitely worry more about you." Cherry said and didn't say anything else. Leaning on my shoulder, her tears wet my clothes in a circle. "Yolanda, I want to be alone with my mom for a while." I was a bit stunned and said okay. Jonathan arranged accommodation for me nearby and said to me, "Yolanda, if you're busy, you can go back first. Don't worry too much and don't delay your own affairs." He was already starting to look like how he treated me in that future. Surprisingly, I didn't feel much turmoil in my heart. I shook my head. After seeing him off, I curled up under the quilt by myself and thought of my own parents. Opening my contacts, thinking about it, I accidentally dialed my mother's number. Beep. After a few seconds of the dialing tone, a message came from the other side. "The number you dialed is out of service. Please try again later." It turned out that the other person had already changed their phone number. I used to blame myself for not being able to live as gently and positively as others, or even being a bit more carefree. Later, when I grew up a bit, I realized that without that gentle confidence and without having been illuminated by kindness, it was really hard to do so. I felt sad for Cherry. Although I couldn't fully empathize with her, I was still shrouded in a sense of confusion that things had changed while people remained the same. On the other hand, I hoped that Cherry could recover soon and that her mother's health would improve. It turns out that people yearn for beauty and warmth, even if it belongs to others. When I saw Cherry again the next day, her eyes were swollen like peaches. She opened her mouth with a bit of a dazed expression. "Yolanda, my mom said that she hopes Jonathan and I can get married soon so that she can be at ease." It seems that elders always worry about their children's future. Jonathan's mother is like this, and Cherry's mother is no exception. "Yolanda, I hope you can be my bridesmaid." Cherry's expression was a bit cautious, as if she was afraid of making me feel uncomfortable. She quickly added, "It's okay if you're busy with work. Our wedding is going to be a bit rushed and we haven't got a clue yet." I thought about it for a while. I couldn't quite put my finger on how I felt, but I still replied to her, "I'm available. I have the time." I simply took my annual leave and stayed here to help out. The day before the wedding, Cherry pushed her mother, who was in a wheelchair, and the three of us had a meal together. Auntie looked extremely tired. She held my hand and said a few words of gratitude, hurriedly thanking me for helping. I was just about to say that Auntie was being too polite. Cherry blinked and said that I deserved most of the credit for this wedding. She even showed me photos of Cherry when she was a kid, saying that she wasn't that well behaved before. Later, when she grew up and didn't want to be like her scumbag father, she became more and more like a little adult. On Jonathan's side, everything was done according to the wedding customs. Standing beside Jonathan's parents, who were in good health now, they also called me Yolanda with a smile, following Jonathan's way of addressing me. Jonathan and Cherry were still a bit less experienced than me. Moreover, in that future I had experienced before, I had already gone through the wedding process once, although it seemed a bit absurd now. On the wedding day, I felt like I was in a daze, like a puppet, finally coming to the unfamiliar parts of the ceremony. I stumbled a few times and got distracted for no reason. Listening to the two of them answering each other during the ceremony, Auntie had tears in her eyes, and even Jonathan's parents were extremely excited, stuttering several times because they were so happy. Those faces, people who were fairly familiar, suddenly became so strange that I went to the washroom to wash my face. I looked so strange in the mirror too, and it seemed that I didn't belong here. Cherry hinted to me with her eyes several times to ask what was wrong. I responded with a smile. She didn't believe it, but she was too busy to come over and ask. On the wedding stage, Cherry's long white wedding dress trailed on the ground, reaching my feet. We, the not-so-familiar bridesmaids and groomsmen, stood there, looking at the bridal bouquet, waiting to see who would catch it. Suddenly, the noise on the field quieted down. Cherry turned around and didn't choose to throw the bouquet backwards. Instead, she walked closer to me and reached out her hand to me. I went up on the stage following her gesture. She held the microphone in her hand and said, "Yolanda, today is the happiest day of my life. At this moment, I want to hand this bouquet, which represents the transfer of happiness, to you. Jonathan, you, and I, the three of us will always be the best of friends." She was smiling, gently and dazzlingly, just like the scene I saw when I rushed to their high school that year. They looked like a perfect couple, with bright smiles and their fingers intertwined. I stood on the side, watching redundantly, feeling embarrassed and wanting to cry, and even a bit lost, not knowing where to go. Those futures that remained in my memory had been changed and erased bit by my own hands until now. Those emotions, admiration, warmth, all the feelings, had truly become a past known only to me. I had a bit of wine at the wedding banquet. Actually, I was really happy for them from the bottom of my heart. But some kind of sadness urged me to let go and drink more. I got a bit drunk and was feeling dizzy now. The emotions that had been suppressed in my heart finally burst out. With tears in my eyes, I grabbed Cherry's wrist and asked, I coveted Jonathan so much back then. I was so despicable and shameless, so strange and withdrawn. Why were you still willing to be so gentle with me? Why did you even consider me your best friend?" Cherry thought about it very seriously. She turned around to sit face to face with me and refuted me with a serious expression. "Yolanda, that's not true. I haven't given you as much as you've given me. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even be able to stand here now. You're not despicable at all. You're super nice. Otherwise, even if I wanted to repay your kindness, I wouldn't have pretended until now." Her warm hand gently wiped away my tears. Her voice was soft and slow as she continued to speak seriously. "Also, when someone is crying or getting hurt around me, I'll be very worried too. Just like you couldn't bear to leave me in that alley to suffer. I couldn't bear to stand by and watch you cry either, so I just got close to you without knowing why." 33. She paused for a while. Her expression when saying these words was a bit shy and coy, but she still said with a slightly flushed face, "And I think that love shouldn't always be full of suffering, cold like the Dead Sea. Love exists for us to live. When we have our own love, it becomes easier to tell what true love is. Yolanda, you're great. You've found a wonderful love on your own. We're willing to stay by your side because of your charm, not because of some one-sided charity. Yolanda, don't cry. You're really amazing now, living for yourself and loving yourself." Yes. In my friend's embrace, I was crying so hard that I could hardly speak. Born for love, living for oneself. Before having one's own gentle moonlight, try to illuminate oneself first. I thought to myself like this. Suddenly, Cherry's face when she was a kid flashed through my mind. I remembered. The name of the female classmate who saved me from school bullying in primary school was also Cherry. She just transferred to City later. She was still as beautiful as I remembered. Just as nice. After saying those words, Cherry couldn't hold back her tears either. She wasn't a sentimental person. Probably it was just that her mother's illness recently, along with all these partings and emotions, made people's hearts soften easily. Later, she was a bit tipsy too. She held on to Jonathan's arm and wouldn't let go, giggling and saying, "Yolanda, happiness doesn't just rely on the bridal bouquet. I've recently noticed quite a few handsome men. Wait for me to pack them up one by one and send them to you." Jonathan couldn't help but chuckle. He looked at the banquet that hadn't ended yet with a helpless smile. Yolanda was resting her chin on her hands, looking bored, with an expression of being lost in thought, not knowing what she was thinking. From time to time, she raised the back of her hand to wipe her eyes, even though there were no tears in them. She muttered to herself, "Damn it. Seeing them get married, I suddenly want to fall in love too." It seemed like she cursed someone for being an idiot later. Judging from the shape of her lips, it seemed like a two-character name. Jonathan yawned, lowered his eyes, and gently stroked the top of Cherry's head. He said gently, "Hey, you can ask Yolanda if she needs it when the time comes." But actually, Jonathan looked at another male classmate from university on the field. He was the most popular guy in that batch, and half of the alumni jokingly called him the school hunk. It was said that he had already had a girl he had a crush on, and he had been consistent until now. In his eyes, there was only that girl who was currently in a daze. And it was obvious who the girl he had a crush on and considered as his first love was. Jonathan smiled. He thought to himself, "You're looking at the moonlight through the window, and the person looking at the moonlight is looking at you from outside the window." From a long distance away, he inexplicably wanted to say something to that girl. "You'll have it too. Your own gentle moonlight."